Hello, thank you so much for joining me today for a romance recommendation video where I'm talking about books that either have a surprise baby or a secret baby in them. So without further ado, I'm going to kick straight off with my first recommendation, which is Reckless by Elsie Silver, and this is book 4 in her Chestnut Springs series. This one is a contemporary small town romance between Theo and Winter, and Theo is actually part of the bull riding community and Winter, I believe, is a doctor. What happens in this story is that Winter has recently split up from her husband. He wasn't a particularly great person, they didn't have a great relationship, but one of the things that she always really wanted was to have a baby, but they never ended up becoming pregnant. And when things kind of fell apart in their relationship, she ends up moving to Chestnut Springs to be closer to her sister and really get away from her ex-husband. Now, because Theo is a bull rider, like I said, he is close to the kind of extended family in this series and is very good friends with the hero from book 1. And so when Winter kind of goes to a family gathering, Theo happens to be there, and they definitely have a great chemistry. They get on really well together. And when Theo offers to take her back to her hotel, because at first when she first goes there she's just staying in a hotel before she moves in permanently, they end up spending the night together and having this one night stand. After that they kind of go their separate ways and Theo goes off to do what he's doing, and Winter ends up, like I say, permanently moving into town. Now it's not too long before she realises that she is pregnant, and she attempts to tell Theo that he's going to be a father, but things don't quite work out, and she does this in a manner where she sends him a text message, but he doesn't have his mobile phone at the time. It actually goes through to his agent, and his agent conceals his information from Theo and actually kind of puts her off in this text message and make it sound like Theo isn't interested at all in being a father and that he doesn't want anything to do with it. And so she then decides that she's going to raise this child on her own because, like I said at the start, she's always really wanted a baby and now this is her opportunity. Now her family are obviously asking her who the father is, but she never reveals who the father is, and it is some time before she ends up bumping into Theo again. In fact, it's long enough that she has already given birth by the time that Theo comes back into her life. And of course, when he finds out that she's had a baby, he does the maths in his head and realises that the baby is his. One of the best things I love about this book is how Theo reacts, and not only is he absolutely devastated that he missed out on the opportunity to be with her when she was pregnant and to see his child being born, he is also absolutely, distraught and hurt by the circumstances that have kind of kept them apart as well. But he is absolutely all in. There's no way he's going to back down from being a father, and he is going to want to be part of this child's life. And so like I said, the best part of this book is how Theo reacts when he finds out that he's going to be a dad, and he's all in. And from there he then picks up where he left off with Winter, and their relationship goes from there. So a really great book, a great recommendation for this particular trope. Next up, one that I really enjoyed and I read a couple of years ago, was Hitting the Wall by Cate C. Wells, and this is book 1 in the Stonecut County series. This is another small town romance, and this one is actually a second chance, if you like, although they weren't really together in the start, but we were following Shay and Kellum Wall. Now it's really important to know his surname because in this town the Walls are very well known. They have a lot of money, they have a lot of power in the town. They're one of the founding families of this particular town, and so they hold a lot of sway, a lot of power in the town. And actually our hero Kellum at the start of this story is a deputy sheriff, or becomes a deputy sheriff later on. Meanwhile, our heroine Shay kind of comes from the wrong side of the tracks. She doesn't have a great upbringing. She's kind of brought up by her grandparents. Her mother is not really fit to be a mother at all, and so she's had a bit of a hard life. But one night she goes to this kind of like party, there's like a kind of a bonfire, and she ends up meeting Kellum. She's only 17 at the time. Kellum's a few years older, and he doesn't realise that she's underage, but they end up spending a night together, and as a result of this she ends up pregnant. Now, she attempts to tell Callum about this, but his parents find out and they actually take her to one side and really bully her, blackmail her into leaving town because they don't want their family name to be tarnished. They don't want Callum to get into trouble for sleeping with a girl who was underage and ruin his reputation, because obviously this family is, like I say, very powerful in this place. And also they don't 100% believe her when she says that Callum is the father. And so they really blackmail her and bully her into leaving town, and so she does. And she disappears, and she really struggles to bring up her child, but is doing the best that she can. Jump to 7 years later, and now she is back in town because she needs to be there to look after her grandparents. And of course she is now bringing a 7-year-old child along beside her. And one day she's kind of walking down the side of the road to get back to where she's living, and Callum happens to drive by and he stops the car and offers her a lift, realises who she is, recognises her, and also does the maths and realises that he could potentially be the father of her child. And of course he is going to, again, when he finds this out, he's going to be all in. He wants to absolutely be involved. But of course, Shay is going to be very cautious and not fully trusting him, because she definitely believes that he is as rotten as his family is for sure. But the problem is that Callum doesn't know any of this. He has absolutely no idea that she was ever pregnant, that his family ran her out of town. And when he starts to learn the truth about what's been going on, the wool is definitely taken away from his eyes, shall we say, and he starts to realise the seriousness of the situation and just how corrupt his family really are. And like I say, I just love how supportive he is of Shay and his daughter, and what he will do to ensure that they can be together in the future, and how he protects her from his family as well. Next up, I've got the first of a couple of mafia romances that I want to talk about, and the first one is The Director by Renee Rose. This is book 1 in her Chicago Bratbit series. This is a Russian mafia story. We are following Reilly, who is the pecan of this mafia family, and Lucy, who happens to be a lawyer. Now, this couple actually meet at the start of this book in a sex club. She is looking for a dominant for the night. She is submissive, and she is paired with our hero in this one, Reilly. And so they spend a night together in this sex club. Now, obviously when she sees him naked, she sees that he's got some tattoos, which very much indicates that he's part of the mafia. But of course, while that wouldn't be an ideal situation, normally it's only for one night in this sex club, and so she really doesn't think she's ever gonna see him again. And she doesn't. She leaves and she goes back to where she actually lives, because I think this sex club is in New York. They both happen to be there for the weekend, but they both interestingly happen to live in Chicago. But she thinks that she's never gonna see him again. Now, a few months go by and then she finds out that she's actually pregnant, and she decides that she's going to keep the baby, but she also makes the decision she isn't going to tell the hero about it, because she doesn't think that a mafia man is going to necessarily be the right role model for her child. So she chooses to keep this from him. However, their paths are going to cross again, because she's a lawyer, like I said, and one of his men get into trouble and needs legal support, and who should that be but her? And so when he comes to the meeting, obviously he sees her, he hasn't forgotten her, and what's more, it's clear that she is pregnant. And again, he does the maths, realizes that he's the father of this child, and then is livid and enraged that she would try and keep this fact from him. So at first he does behave like a bit of an asshole. He decides he's going to take her captive, bring her to her apartment, and his plan is to wait until she gives birth to the baby and then force her to leave the baby with him and not let her have anything to do with this child. But of course she's not going to stand for that either. And like I said, so he's a bit of an arsehole to start off with, but very quickly, you know, they do have great chemistry together. They are good together. Very quickly they're going to develop feelings for one another and decide to go all in on this relationship and bring up this child together. So really enjoyed this one, and a short, quick and easy read from Renee Rose as well. Straight on then to the next mafia romance, and that is Darkest Sins by Neva Altaj. This is book 9 in her Perfectly Imperfect series, but you could just start with this one if you wanted to. And we were following Nera and Kai. Like I said, this is a mafia romance, particularly an Italian mafia romance, and this is also a hidden identity. There's some stalking in here, caretaking, a damaged hero. Our hero is actually an assassin. There's an age gap between these two, and of course, since this is appearing in this video, there is a secret baby in here as well. Because Kai is, like I said, a mafia assassin. He's actually pretty unhinged. He's a little bit psychotic, is known to be very, very brutal and not have too many feelings. Meanwhile, Nera is much younger. She's a mafia princess, and at the start of this book she is working in a vet clinic, basically as kind of a vet assistant. Now one night Kai is in the middle of a job, things go a bit south and he ends up being injured, and so he makes his way to this alley where he's kind of bleeding out in this alley, and she's just walking home from work. She sees him and decides to take him back to the vet clinic to patch him up, and of course, because she's a mafia princess, she is not scared of criminals. She realises that he's probably not a great guy, that he's probably into some bad things, hence she agrees not to take him to a hospital and attempts to patch him up herself. But Kai is completely taken with Nera, really taken with her, starts to stalk her and deliberately injures himself, so he's got more excuses to go back and spend some time with her. And of course, over time they are going to have a relationship and end up sleeping together, and it's at this point that Kai finds himself in another situation, and he is kind of held captive by some bad people and therefore completely disappears from Nera's life. And of course she is absolutely devastated, and more so when she determines that she is pregnant with no way to tell him that he's going to be father. And so this couple spend an agonizing 4 years apart until eventually Kai is able to escape his captors and come back for her. But there's a lot of things that happen in that 4-year period. Nera has to do quite a lot in order to protect herself and their child, and so they've got quite a lot of things to unpack and unpick between them, but ultimately they do get a HEA. And so I absolutely loved this book. It's one of my absolute favourites of the series. There's a tie between 9 and 10 in the series for me, so absolutely would recommend. Right, so 2 more mafia romances to recommend before we move on to other subgenres, and I couldn't do this video without, of course, recommending Twisted Pride by Cora Reilly, and this is book 3 in her Cora Chronicles series. So this is an Italian mafia romance with the Camorra faction based in Las Vegas, and the hero in this one is Remo, and he is head of the Camorra, and then Serafina, who is actually a mafia princess from the outfit. Now this one is a captive situation. Our heroine is kidnapped by our hero. She's also a virgin heroine, definitely enemies to lovers, and a forbidden romance between this two as well, but it does end up having a secret baby situation between them. Now, if you know anything about this story, then you may have heard of Remo already. He is an extremely unhinged, psychopathic hero, and he will stop at nothing for his family and to make sure that he remains on top. Now, in the first series, which is the Born in Blood series that Cora Reilly wrote, we had heard about Remo then, and as we get to the Camorra Chronicles we find out much more about Remo's family, but there is no love lost between the outfit, which is where Serafina comes from, and also another Italian mafia faction based out of New York, and so they're all fighting between themselves. In fact, it's come to a bit of a head, and so Remo has now hatched this plan where he's going to kidnap Serafina on her wedding day because she's about to be arranged in marriage to somebody else, and then he's going to keep her captive and use her to bargain her life. So he's going to exchange her for somebody else that they really want to get their hands on to torture and unalive, and so Serafina is going to be the bargaining chip in all of this. So this very much starts out where they basically go intercept her limo on the way to her wedding and then take her captive, like I say, literally in her wedding dress, which is what we see her in here on the front cover of this book, and then they take her back to Las Vegas, and Remo absolutely delights in being cruel to her, trying to instill a lot of fear into her and trying to convince her family that he is very much torturing her and not treating her well at all, so that they will ultimately relent and do the trade that he wants to do. The thing is, yes, Serafina is scared. She's heard lots of bad things about Remo. She definitely doesn't want to be in his captivity, but also she is extremely feisty. She's a mafia princess and she's not going to back down, and she doesn't want to show him how afraid she is. And this really intrigues Remo, and he's actually quite proud of her, but also very attracted to her as well. And so they start this relationship, and it's very awkward because, you know, Remo doesn't understand his feelings towards her. He doesn't know how to deal with his feelings towards her, and she also harbours a lot of guilt for the fact that she is very attracted to him and wants to be with him when she knows that he is her family's mortal enemy. So there is a lot of trouble in this relationship, shall we say. It's very emotionally charged, but also a fantastic relationship. And of course there's going to be a point in this story where Remo is going to have to let her go and carry out the trade that he has so badly wanted, and it's not until after he's let her go that he realises his mistake. But what he doesn't know is that he's made an even bigger mistake than he actually thinks, because when she gets back to her family, she realises that she is in fact pregnant with twins, and so Remo is unknowingly going to be father to twins, and this is now the ramifications of what's going to happen not only to Serafina but to his children as well, because obviously her family are not going to take too kindly to the fact that she is going to be giving birth to his spawn, shall we say. So things aren't going to end up too well for Serafina when she finally makes her way back to her family. That's all I'm going to say about this one. I've already probably said too much. I don't know if the fact that she is pregnant is supposed to be a spoiler, but this book has been around for such a long time now. I know so many people have read it and it's beloved by many. I don't feel too bad about revealing that in this story, but if you were looking for a great mafia romance with a secret baby, I think this is probably the ultimate one. Would definitely recommend. Still, there's one final mafia romance that I want to share, and that is Cosa Nostra by Nicci Harris, and this is book 2 in the Kids of the District series and book 2 in a duet, which starts with Our Thing and ends with Cosa Nostra. And this basically follows Max Butcher and Cassidy Slater. I absolutely loved this duet when I read it at the start of the year. One of my favourites of the year so far, and I absolutely love Max Butcher as a hero. He is super protective of our heroine, and I absolutely loved to see it. So essentially in book 1, Max and Cassidy do end up together. It's a very fraught relationship. At first there's a lot of push and pull. He pretends that he has no emotions for her, he doesn't want to get involved with her, but he absolutely does have feelings for her and becomes very possessive and protective of her, like I said, and he treats her absolutely amazingly despite his kind of gruff exterior. Now book 1 ends on quite a cliffhanger. It's quite traumatic to read, and so you're definitely going to be compelled to carry on with this series and this duet and carry on with book 2. And essentially in book 2 we find out that Cassidy is pregnant with Max's child, and of course he's going to be all in straight away. So this is not a secret baby, she doesn't keep it from him. He knows from straight away that she is pregnant, and of course he's all in. He wants to marry her, he wants to be with her, and attempts to do everything he can to protect her. But tragedy strikes for this couple and things are not going to be plain sailing. And I think part of the reason I love this book so much was how emotional it was. It definitely made me cry, and the extreme agony that this couple have to go through at one point in this story, and made worse by the fact that she, you know, is pregnant and having his child, and there's a period of time where they can't be together. So I just absolutely thought this was a fantastic story, and like I said, very emotional. Would definitely recommend. Okay, so that's all the mafia romances. So we're going to go back to a more contemporary style of romance, and this is actually a sports romance, and I want to recommend The Goal by Elle Kennedy, and this is book 4 in her very popular off-campus series that features Tucker and Sabrina. So this is an ice hockey romance. Tucker is an ice hockey player in a college team, and we've seen Tucker through the other stories. In fact, at the end of book 3 we know at that point that Tucker has in fact got Sabrina pregnant. So it ends very much on a cliffhanger, and as we go into book 4 and see Tucker and Sabrina's story, we get taken back to find out exactly how all of that went down. And what I really loved about this one again is that our hero is very much a golden retriever style of hero. Our heroine is very much a black cat. She doesn't trust people very much, she doesn't want to let people in, and she's afraid to get into a relationship. and be reliant on someone else. And so Tucker's got a hard job ahead of him because he is all in. He wants to be with her, he wants to marry her, he absolutely wants to be a father to this child, but he spends a lot of this book trying to convince her that he isn't going to get in the way of her career, that he's going to be totally supportive and help her get to where she wants to go, and that he's got no ulterior motives other than just wanting to love her and love their child. So I absolutely love this one and thought that it was a great end to this particular series. Okay, next up then we've got By the Letter by Julia Wolf, and this was book 2 in her Mile High Billionaire series. This is another contemporary romance, except this time this is a billionaire romance as well. It's close proximity, enemies to lovers, found family, hidden identity, a one-night stand. It starts off in a sex club and, like I say, a surprise baby in this one. So we are following Roman and Shira. So at the very start of this book, Roman and Shira have a one-night stand in a sex club. They actually put in their preferences into an app, they get matched and they spend the night together. However, during their encounter, one of their condoms split, and so Roman basically says to her, if something should happen, i.e. you should find yourself pregnant, then make sure that you contact the front desk. They know how to get a hold of me and I'll make sure that you are taken care of. And they go their separate ways. Then this couple end up meeting again, and what I should say as well is they've both worn masks during this encounter, so they don't actually know who each other is. Skip forward then a couple of months and this couple end up meeting again, and this time in a workplace situation, because Shira used to be married to a very wealthy man who owns his own business, but he was much older than her and has recently passed away, and now she's kind of inherited this business and is now the CEO. However, she's really struggling to kind of manage it. The company is not doing well, and Roman is kind of brought in to kind of like do a bit of an audit, figure out what's going on, try and save the company, and if he can't, he's going to sell it off piece by piece. Now, when this couple first meet each other in this workplace situation, they really don't get on at all. Shira is really sweet and timid, but is unable to really stick up for herself. She's quite quiet. As a result, she can come across as aloof and as someone who doesn't really care. And Roman straight away jumps to the wrong conclusion that she is not fit to be the CEO of this company, that clearly she married her ex-husband because she was just a gold digger and wanted his cash, and now she is running this company into the ground. And so they get off on a really bad footing. And then the situation is made worse when Shira finds out she's pregnant. She leaves a message for Roman in this sex club, and then Roman gets this message and realizes that the woman that he spent the night with, that he can't forget, is in fact the woman in this workplace situation where they're really not getting on, and he's going to be the father of her child. And of course, as soon as he realizes this information, again, what is wonderful about Roman is, again, he's all in. He starts to look at the situation differently. He takes the time to get to know Shira, realizes that he's made a terrible mistake, and then sets about putting things right. He grovels, he demonstrates how much she can trust him, and he really puts the work in and the effort in to earn her forgiveness and regain her trust, and they end up then back in a relationship together. So I really enjoyed this one. I think Julia Wolf always does a fantastic job of creating a fantastic hero who's very swoon worthy, and I really just love the setup for this one, so would definitely recommend. So the last recommendation I've got for you today is a fantasy romance. It's Hunger in His Blood by Zoey Draven, which is book 3 in the Brides of the Kylor series. Like I said, this is kind of a fantasy romance, but you could also say it's paranormal, a little bit sci-fi as well. It's angsty, close proximity, fated mates. They have a bit of a sex deal, and it's a virgin heroine in this one as well. And we were following Calder and Arena. Now, in this series, the heroes are kind of half berserkers, half vampires, so they've kind of got wings, they can fly, but they also drink blood, and drinking blood makes them stronger. In particular, if they find a blood mate, the blood that they drink from their blood mate makes them like the ultimate berserkers and super powerful, super strong. Having a blood mate is also like having a fated mate, and when you're in close proximity to your blood mate, you become a little bit more sexual, shall we say. And so Caldor sure finds himself in a situation where he is constantly turned on and it's driving him absolutely mad. And he is kind of sleeping his way through quite a few women to see if he can scratch this itch, which he's never able to scratch. Because unbeknownst to him, this whole time his blood mate is right under his nose, because it is in fact a servant in his household, and it is Irina. So Irina has been in his household for 2 years, causing him all kinds of problems that he doesn't even know about, doesn't understand. But she has secretly had a crush on him this whole time. She's very, very drawn to him, thinks he's really, really attractive, wants to be with him, and is kind of has secret daydreams about him, shall we say. So imagine his surprise when they finally kind of have an interaction together. They're in close proximity with one another, and he figures out that she is his blood mate. Still, he's completely sworn off kind of women and fallen in love, and so he does a little bit of an underhanded thing where he decides that he's not going to tell her that she's his blood mate, even though she is, and in fact instead convince her to enter into a sex deal with him, where she will no longer be a servant in his household. She'll become his mistress. He'll give her everything she wants and luxury accommodations in return for him being able to drink her blood whenever he wants. And of course, this relationship does turn sexual pretty quickly, and Irina in particular does fall for him, because she was already halfway there, right, and now she's madly in love with him. But Cate takes a little bit longer to figure out that is where his feelings are heading, and of course he's going to do the obnoxious thing and try and push her away in order to save his own heart. However, he pushes her too far, and eventually she decides she's not going to put up with being treated that way anymore, and she decides she's going to leave him, and she leaves. And of course he's devastated, but it's too late and she's gone. He doesn't quite know where she's gone, and after she's disappeared, it's only a few weeks time that she realizes that she's pregnant, and she is going to write him a letter to tell him, but this letter is intercepted by somebody quite evil who definitely wants to come between them, and so he never gets the memo, as it were, and as a result she thinks he isn't interested, doesn't care, doesn't want to be a father, and so she's obviously heartbroken but determined to stay away. And in the meantime he's desperately searching for her so he can find her, bring her back to his place, and finally admit his true feelings for her. And so it takes him a while, but eventually they do find their way back together, and when that happens he obviously is going to discover that she is expecting his child. So there we go, that's 9 romance recommendations that feature a secret baby or surprise baby. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and if you've got any surprise baby or secret baby recommendations that you want to recommend to me, don't hesitate to put those in the comments down below, or fill in my book recommendation form, a link to which is also in the description box down below. So with that, all that's left for me to do is thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hello, thank you so much for joining me. Hello, thank you so much for joining me today. Whoop. This is a contemporary